Hello, church family. Welcome to today's Sunday school lesson. We are in week 5, Rise Up and Do the Work, and we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 17, and going all the way to chapter 6, verse 16. We will be reading the whole thing together, so just to get ready, and we're going to read together. Pray for my throat. I have some water here, so if I get parched while I'm reading, I have that. We have a lot of context going on. We're going to look at how Nehemiah inspired the Israelite people to rise up and do the work, how he spurred them on. We're going to look at the difference in people who are nobles and people who are common and see how they interacted with each other. There's just a lot here. I am going to be mostly focusing on the context and less on the actual Rise Up lesson. We're going to be just looking at Nehemiah chapter 2 and 2 through 6, and it's going to be a long one. This is the longest passage of scripture I've had to teach before. I will not be able to hit every detail. I'm going to do my best to grab the bigger points and relate them to Emory Baptist Church and what we're trying to do right now. But that is going to be basically the extent we're going to read this together. I will stop and explain things as we go. We're going to talk about some locations that we looked at last week, and that will be our lesson today. So let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to start in chapter 2, verse 17, and I'm just going to start reading along. Here we go. Verse 17, So I said to them, the officials who did not know where he had gone, and those who he had not told, the Jews and the nobles and the officials that he mentioned in verse 16, and so now he's saying to them, You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned. Come, let's rebuild Jerusalem's wall so that we will no longer be a disgrace. I told them how the gracious hand of my God had been on me, and what the king had said to me. They said, Let's start rebuilding, and their hands were strengthened to do this good work. Notice that the Israelite people immediately were just, all right, on board, let's go. There was no hesitation, there was no question. They said, let's do the thing. Verse 19, When Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about this, they mocked and despised us. Remember, these guys are the opposition that Nehemiah mentioned last week in our lesson. If we look back over at verse 10 of chapter 2, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard that someone had come to pursue the prosperity of the Israelites, they were greatly displeased. Well, this is them now acting on their displeasure. They mocked and despised us and said, What is this you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king? And I gave them this reply, The God of the heavens is the one who will grant us success. We, his servants, will start building, but you have no share, right, or historic claim in Jerusalem. Chapter 3. The high priest Eliashib, and his fellow priests began rebuilding the sheep gate. They dedicated it and installed its doors. After building the wall to the Tower of the 100 and the Tower of Hananel, they dedicated it. The men of Jericho built next to Eliashib, and next to them Zachar, son of Imri, built. The sons of Hassenaah built the fish gate. They built it with beams and installed its doors, bolts, and bars. Next to them, Memorah, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakaz, made repairs. Besides them, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, son of Meshezabel, made repairs. Next to them, Zadok, the son of Baana, made repairs. Beside them, the Tekoites made repairs, but their nobles did not lift a finger to help their supervisors. Now you see there in verse 5 of chapter 3 that the Tekoites made the repairs, but their nobles did not lift a finger to help. The ordinary men of Tekoa, they actually will see what they do here in a little bit. Joiada, son of Paseah, and Meshullam, son of Besodiah, repaired the old gate. They built it with beams and installed its doors, bolts, and bars. Next to him, the repairs were done by Melatiah the Gibeonite, Jadon the Meronothite, yes, and the men of Gibeon and Mizpah, who were under the authority of the governor of the region west of the Euphrates River. After him, Uzziel, son of Harhiah the goldsmith, made repairs, and next to him Hananiah, son of perfumer son of the perfumer, made repairs. They restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Next to them, Raphiah, son of Hur, ruler of half the district of Jerusalem, made repairs. After them, Jediah, son of Harumoth, made repairs from his house. Next to him, Haddush, the son of Hashabaniah, made repairs. Malchijah, son of Haram, and Hasub, son of Patha Moab, made repairs to another section as well as to the Tower of the Ovens. Beside him, Shalom, son of Halohesh, ruler of the half district of Jerusalem, made repairs. He and his daughters. We're just going to keep going down this list. I apologize for my pronunciation of these names. This is the first time I've read it out loud, and so I'm having trouble pronouncing them. Hanan and the inhabitants of Zanoah repaired the valley gate. They rebuilt it and installed its doors, bolts, and bars, and repaired 500 yards of the wall to the dung gate. Malchijah, son of Rechab, ruler of the district of Beth Hacherem, repaired the dung gate. He rebuilt it and installed its doors, bolts, and bars. Shallun, son of Kolhoza, ruler of the district of Mizpah, repaired the fountain gate. He rebuilt it and roofed it. Then he installed its doors, bolts, and bars. He also made repairs to the wall of Pool of Shelah near the king's garden, as far as the stairs that descended to the city of David. After him, Nehemiah, son of Azbuk, ruler of half the district of Beth-Zur, made repair up to a point opposite of the tombs of David, as far as the artificial pool and the house of the warriors. Next to him, the Levites made repairs under Rehum, son of Bani. Beside him, Hashabiah, ruler of half the district of Keilah, made the repairs for his district. After him, their fellow Levites made repairs under the Benui, son of Henadad, the ruler of half the district of Keilah. Next to him, Ezer, son of Jeshua, ruler of Mizpah, made repairs to another section opposite the ascent to the Armony at the angle. After him, Barak, son of Zabai, diligently repaired another section from the angle to the door from the house of the high priest Eliashib. Beside him, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, son of Hakkoz, made repairs to another section from the door of Eliashib's house to the end of his house. And next to him, the priests from surrounding areas made repairs. After them, Benjamin and Hashub made repairs opposite of their house. Beside them, Azariah, son of Messiah, son of Ananiah, made repairs beside his house. After him, Benui, son of Henadad, made repairs to another section from the house of Azariah to the angle, and the corner. Palal, son of Uzai, made repairs opposite the angle and tower that juts out from the king's upper palace, by the courtyard of the guard. Beside him, Pedadiah, son of Parosh, and the temple servants living on the Ophel, made repairs opposite the water gate toward the east and the towers that juts out. Next to him, the Tekoites made repairs to another section. Notice that the Tekoites, whose nobles were not helping, back over in, where was that? I've lost my spot where they started helping now. Give me just 1 second. Verse 5, the Tekoites made repairs, but their nobles did not lift a finger to help. Well, now they've even taken upon themselves to repair a second section. So they've done more than they were called to do. They are going above and beyond the call of duty here to do 2 sections. Another section from a point opposite the great tower that juts out as far as the wall of Ophel. Each of the priests made repairs above the horse gate, each opposite his own house. After them, Zadok, son of Immer, made repairs opposite his house, and beside him, Shemaiah, son of Shechaniah, guard of the east gate, made repairs. Next to him, Hananiah, son of Shelemiah, and Hanan, the sixth son of Zalaph, made repairs to another section. After them, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, made repairs opposite this room. Next to him, Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, made repairs to the house of the temple servants and the merchants opposite the inspection gate, as far as the upstairs room on the corner. The goldsmiths and merchants made repairs between the upstairs room on the corner and the sheep gate. So chapter 3 is just a list of who is repairing what. We see the fish gate repaired, the old gate, the broad wall, the tower of the ovens, the valley gate, the dung gate, and the fountain gate, the angle, the water gate, and the tower on the Ophel. the horse gate, the inspection gate, and the sheep gate. And now we're going to see progress in spite of opposition. That's how my Bible titles chapter 4. This is going to be where these guys, Sanballat and the others, are actually going to provide some opposition to what is happening in Jerusalem. Chapter 4. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became furious. He mocked the Jews before his colleagues and the powerful men of Samaria and said, "What are these pathetic Jews doing? Can they restore it by themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they ever finish it? Can they bring these burnt stones back to life from the mounds of rubble?" When Tobiah the Ammonite, who was beside him, said, "Indeed, even if a fox climbed up what they were building, he would break down their stone wall." Foxes are not very heavy. They're light and spry creatures. They land lightly on their feet. And he's saying that even a fox, even its weight, would break down the stone wall that the Israelites have rebuilt. "Listen, our God, for we are displeased. Make their insults return on their own heads, and let them be taken as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their guilt or let their sin be erased from your sight, because they have angered the builders." So we rebuilt the wall until the entire wall was rejoined up to half its height, for the people had the will to keep working. Verse 6 is very important, especially that last part. For the people had the will to keep working. When Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites heard that the repair to the walls of Jerusalem was progressing and that the gaps were being closed, they became furious. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw it into confusion. So we prayed to our God and stationed a guard because of them day and night. In Judah it was said, "The strength of the laborers fails, since there is so much rubble. We will never be able to rebuild the wall." And our enemies said, "They won't realize it until we're among them and can kill them and stop the work." When the Jews who lived nearby arrived, they said to us time and again, "Everywhere you turn, they attack us." So I stationed people behind the lowest sections of the wall to the vulnerable areas. I stationed them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I made an inspection, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "Don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord, and fight for your countrymen, your sons and daughters, your wives and homes." When our enemies heard that we knew of their scheme and that God had frustrated it, every one of us returned to his own work on the wall. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half held spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers supported all the people of Judah who were rebuilding the wall. The laborers who carried the loads worked with one hand and held a weapon with the other. Each of the builders had his sword strapped around his waist while he was building, and the trumpeter was beside me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "The work is enormous and spread out, and we are separated far from one another along the wall. Wherever you hear the trumpet sound, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us." So we continued the work, while half the men were holding spears from daybreak until the stars came out. At that time I also said to the people, "Let everyone and his servants spend the night inside Jerusalem, so that they can stand guard by night and work by day." And I, my brothers, my servants, and the men of the guard with me never took off our clothes. Each carried his weapon, even when washing. There was a widespread outcry from the people and their wives against their Jewish countrymen. Some were saying, "We, our sons, and our daughters are numerous. Let us get grain so that we can eat and live." Others were saying, "We are mortgaging our fields, vineyards, and homes to get grain during famine." Still others were saying, "We have borrowed money to pay the king's tax on our fields and vineyards. We and our children are just like our countrymen and their children, yet we are subjecting our sons and daughters to slavery. Some of our daughters are already enslaved, but we are powerless because our fields and vineyards belong to others." I became extremely angry when I heard their outcry and these complaints. After seriously considering the matter, I accused the nobles and officials, saying to them, "Each of you is charging his countrymen interests." So I called a large assembly against them and said, "We have done our best to buy back our Jewish countrymen who were sold to foreigners, but now you sell your own countrymen, and we have to buy them back." They remained silent and could not say a word. So what's happening here in this first part of chapter 5 is that in the process of moving back to Israel, people were getting their farms and everything, but they were having to mortgage them. They were having to take out loans from someone, a rich family, a bank, whatever is happening in Jerusalem. And these Jews who were loaning the money were charging interest on their own countrymen. And it was causing them to not be able to make a profit, not be able to provide for their families. In fact, several of them had to sell their daughters into slavery in order to be able to afford life and food and being able to do the things that they do to provide for their families. And Nehemiah sees this and goes, "Why are you charging your own countrymen interest? Why are you profiting off the suffering of your fellow man when we're all trying to accomplish this goal?" And so he gets really angry. He calls an assembly against them and says, "This is wrong. This is not what you're supposed to do." And we'll see in verse 10 and onward how the people respond to that. So, verse 10, "Even I," this is Nehemiah speaking, "even I, as well as my brothers and my servants, have been lending them money in grain. Please let us stop charging this interest. Return their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses to them immediately, along with the percentage of the money, grain, new wine, and fresh oil that you have been assessing them." They responded, "We will return these things and require nothing more from them. We will do as you say." So they responded very positively to Nehemiah's critiques and the way he refutes them. And so now these people that are in dire straits because of their countrymen, because of the interest being charged them, they're able to get their land back. They're able to provide food for the workers. They're able to provide a life for their family. And so they're no longer going to be enslaved because of the incredible interest they were being charged on their mortgages. "So I summoned the priests and made everyone take an oath to do this. I also shook the folds of my robe and said, 'My God likewise shake from his house and property everyone who doesn't keep this promise. May he be shaken out and have nothing.' The whole assembly said, 'Amen,' and they praised the Lord. The people did as they promised." So we see here that wrong was called out, and when it was, people responded positively. They didn't respond by doubling down on it. They responded instead by repenting of their sin and praising the Lord because of it, and doing as they had promised. This is a very positive change in Israel. And now we're going to look at good and bad governors. "Furthermore, from the day King Artaxerxes appointed me to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year until his 32nd year, 12 years, I and my associates never ate from the food allotted to the governor. The governors who preceded me had heavily burdened the people, taking from them food and wine as well as a pound of silver. Their subordinates also oppressed the people, but because of the fear of God, I didn't do this. Instead, I devoted myself to the construction of this wall, and all my subordinates were gathered there for the work. We didn't buy any land. There were 150 Jews and officials, as well as guests from the surrounding nations at my table. Each day 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, and some fowl were all prepared for me. An abundance of all kinds of wine was provided every 10 days, but I didn't demand the food allotted to the governor because the burden on the people was so heavy. Remember me favorably, my God, for all that I have done for this people." We see here that there were some bad governors before Nehemiah that exploited the people, that took more than they needed, that demanded more than they needed. And Nehemiah said, "I'm not going to do that," because they're already stressed to the point of breaking. They're already working so hard. They've been taxed already. I'm not going to require any more of them than is necessary. He didn't take any money for himself, just the food that was prepared for the governors, the allotment of the governors. And he didn't even demand the food allotted to the governor because of the burden on the people. So now there are some attempts to discourage the builders, and we've got about 16 verses left, and we're just going to talk a little bit. "When Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall and no gap was left in it, though at the time I had not installed the doors and the city gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me a message. 'Come, let's meet together in the villages of the Ono Valley.' They were planning to harm me. So I sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing important work and cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? 4 times they sent me the same proposal, and I gave them the same reply. Sanballat sent me the same message a 5th time by his aide, who had an open letter in his hand. It was written, It is reported among the nations, and Geshem agrees that you and the Jews plan to rebel. This is the reason you are rebuilding the wall. According to these reports, you are to become their king, and have even set up the prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim on your behalf, there is a king in Judah. These rumors will be heard by the king, so come, let's confer together. Then I replied to him, There is nothing to these rumors you are spreading. You are inventing them in your own mind. For they were all trying to intimidate us, saying they will drop their hands from the work, and it will never be finished. But now, my God, strengthen my hands. There's another attempt to intimidate Nehemiah. I went to the house of Shemaiah, son of Deliah, son of Mehetabel, who was restricted to his house. He said, Let's meet at the house of God inside the temple. Let's shut the temple doors, because they're coming to kill you. They're coming to kill you tonight. But I said, Should a man like me run away? How can someone like me enter the temple and live? I will not go. I realized that God had not sent him because of the prophecy he spoke against me. Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He was hired so that I would be intimidated, do as he suggested, sin, and get a bad reputation in order that they could discredit me. My God, remember Tobiah and Sanballat for what they have done, and also for the prophetess Noadiah and the other prophets who wanted to intimidate me. And now, finally, our last 2 verses. The wall completed. The wall was completed in 52 days, on the 25th day of the month of Elul. When all our enemies heard this, all the surrounding nations were intimidated and lost their confidence, for they realized that this task had been accomplished by our God. There's some very important meaning in that last verse, in verse 16. Notice that Nehemiah listed all through chapter 3, everyone who was in charge of rebuilding a section of the wall, what gate they were in charge of. He listed them by name, and these were important people. These people were listed 2 and 3 generations, like their lineage was listed out 2 or 3 generations, so that because their families were well known and they were well known in their community, and it was important that the people heard who was doing the work, who was in charge, so that they would say, oh, we know these folks, we are inspired by these folks, these folks are well liked and well respected, and they're doing this work, and so we're going to help them do the work. And that's how Nehemiah was able to inspire everyone to do the work, because they saw it as coming together and working together to rebuild the wall, to reinstate the glory of Jerusalem, not for their own glory, not for the glory of Israel, but for the glory of the Lord. And we see that God honored this, and it's really God that caused all of it in verse 6, chapter 6, 16, when Nehemiah said, this task had been accomplished by our God. And all the surrounding nations saw this happening. They were able to watch from their cities, and they're sending people out riding around, I'm sure, and they just see all this construction going on, and they see 1 week go by, and they see another week go by, and then a third week. So we're about halfway through, and they're seeing these walls just steadily get built. And then 52 days, just over 6 weeks, the wall was finished, and the doors had been rebuilt. And they lost confidence because they had been saying this whole time, they'll never get it done. It won't happen. They can't do it. What can Israel do? They are nothing. They are nothing, and we're going to discourage them, and we're going to discredit them, and we're going to try to kill Nehemiah, the one in charge of it all, and we're going to tell the king, because they're trying to rise up and they're spreading lies and rumors. And God still caused it to happen. He caused his people to rise up, to work on this project, and to come together to work to a common goal, to reinstate his glory in the city that he promised the Israelites. So we have a little bit of other context we can talk about. We see here that to work well in service to God means to work as his people. Notice that all of these people were working toward a same goal because of each other. They weren't doing it because they wanted personal glory. They got named in chapter 3, but they didn't get anything other than that, really. And so you notice these names of real historical people in chapter 3. Each one was needed and worthy to be written down for generations to read. But Nehemiah says in chapter 4, verse 6, he says, so we built the wall. Not so I built the wall. Not so-and-so built the wall or such and such built the wall. But so we, as a congregation, as a collective people, built the wall. God calls out not just individuals, but a people, first the descendants of Abraham, but finally all those who by faith are redeemed through Abraham's promised seed, the Lord Jesus Christ. The work of God's people demands humility. As many come together to serve the Lord, whom we all belong, we see here that in that list in chapter 3 that it wasn't just the common people working. We see that with the Tekoites, but for the most part, in the grand majority of it all, it was people from the very top, the nobles, down, and they were these nobles who probably did not know much hard labor or manual labor. They had probably built up a pretty good life for themselves in Persia before they went back to Jerusalem, and they were fairly wealthy because life in Persia compared to Babylon and compared to some other exiles was fairly favorable to the Israelites. They were still exiled, but they were able to make money. They were able to make businesses for themselves. These folks had money, and they didn't let that go to their heads. They humbled themselves and worked just as hard as the common people next to them. The proud Tekoite nobles in verse 5, though, are the exception to that rule. Almost as if they are ashamed of their nobles, the ordinary men of Tekoa, like I mentioned, take on an additional section in verse 27 of chapter 3. And so we see here that without the masterful organization that Nehemiah had to assign people sections of the wall and oversee the work, it would not have made for the quick progress that we saw. 52 days is a very short amount of time. We are on week 5 of the Rise Up series. Week 6 is next week. The end of the series is next week, and it feels like we just started this yesterday to me. It feels like I just did week 1's lesson. And so we see here that it takes everyone involved, everyone invested, everyone willing to do the work in order for things to go quickly, in order for things to go smoothly. Now, that doesn't mean we won't face opposition. Obviously, Nehemiah faced opposition from these guys, and I apologize, I can't remember their names easily, so I have to go back and look. Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arab were the 3 guys who were constantly hounding Nehemiah, trying to get him to falter. There will be opposition to the Rise Up series. There will be opposition to the Family Life Center. There will be opposition to Emory Baptist Church doing anything in Emory because there is sin and because Satan wants to tear down good things. He wants to break down our cooperation. He wants to break down our communication. He wants to break down our drive for doing something. And if we are only seeking after our own personal gain, then he will succeed in breaking those things down. But if we are like Nehemiah, if we are like the people of Israel, and we are focused on this common goal because of God's glory, and it's because it's what he wants, then Satan doesn't stand a chance, because God has already won that battle. God has already done the work for us by going before us for it, and we just have to be faithful to answer the call. And so as we get closer to the end of this series and getting into the beginning of the fundraising part of Rise Up, that's the call right now. And my prayer is that we will have 100% participation throughout our congregation from every family that gives, every family that comes, that there will be 100% participation, whether it be in time or prayer or money, however that looks for you. That's up to you and your family to decide. It's not for me or Richard or Ronnie to know or to dictate. Richard will lead us through that. But for us to accomplish what we believe God has wanted Emory Baptist to accomplish, we have to rely on him and make sure that we are doing it for his glory and because of his leading in our lives and in the life of Emory Baptist Church. If this ever becomes about, well, we want this because it's good for us, or we want this because it is going to be awesome, or because it is going to be awesome. But if that's our only focus is the short term, the human, the worldly side of it, this building will never get built. This building will become just a thing that we slave at trying to get done, but God's not in it because we won't let him be in it. We have to let him lead us through it. And we as a staff, and especially Brother Richard and the committee, I don't want to speak for them, but I think it's evident through the leadership of the Family Life Center committee and the capital fundraising team. I think it's evident through their leadership that this is something that Emory Baptist Church wants, and we believe that God wants it. And it's important for us to be united like the people of Israel were united. And so this has been a very long lesson. I'm not going to go over the questions because a lot of them are very group oriented, and I think they have a lot to do with Richard's sermon this week. So you can look over those, discuss them with your family. But I just wanted to go through and read this long section of Nehemiah with you so that we could see how much work went into the walls, so that we can see how much work it's going to take of us to follow that example in building the Family Life Center. Thank you. I hope this has been encouraging to you, and I look forward to worshiping with you very soon. Bye-bye.